following from what was for me last night's presentation and trying to go into a little bit more detail about some of the things that we've observed looking back in terms of barriers to implementation and how we're thinking about things moving forward, and just some comments about how we move forward in this space. So starting out with what excellence in breeding is about, we're really about driving implementation of improved breeding, really. And I mean, it's one thing to provide tools like genomics and the like, but if they're not being applied in a way that enables the breeder and the breeding team to redesign their program to really make full use of the technology available, then there are opportunities going missing. And so there are changes that are required to breeding programs in order to achieve the higher rates of genetic gain and variety turnover that I talked about last night. So really we're about driving implementation of improved breeding, and this comes down to driving change. And as we transition to 1CG, I want to talk a little bit about what we can learn from our past to be more successful going forward. So I guess you could see this presentation as sort of being split in two. I'm going to start out with a bit of a look back and look at some of the things we've learned, and then move into a look forward. So if we're about driving change, I'll start with a quote here that says that without a struggle, there can be no progress. This is really just to acknowledge that change can be uncomfortable, and it is venturing sometimes into the unknown. And when that discomfort is being felt, then just please remind ourselves that this is a natural feeling, and that we have to go through this in order to make progress. So some of the specific things that we've noticed looking back, first of all, strong sponsorship from senior leaders is critical. This is not just what we've noticed. This is a very well known fact of change management, that this is critical. And I mean, this follows from even right back to our annual meeting back in 2019, where we had a really strong push on this, where we got DDGRs and senior breeding leads into the room to talk about how we'll move forward with stronger sponsorship. And there was a separate one with DGs just a few months prior to that. Improvements can come about when you provide opportunity for those most affected to come up with solutions. This is about empowering those that are really on the ground and letting them come up with the solutions and letting them own it and implement it. This works particularly well when combined with that strong sponsorship from above. Cultural change is needed, and really individual scientists and managers need to own the plan for moving forward, and for I guess the blueprint for the final destination, and that blueprint of what the program will look like in the future, and the plan, the roadmap for how to get there, and really drive the implementation. I mentioned earlier that sometimes you have to venture into the unknown. Sometimes it's not going to always work, and that's okay. It's okay to fail. And particularly if we can recognize early that this is what's happening and course correct, then that's exactly as it should be. The last thing we want to do is be scared of making a wrong decision and suffer from paralysis by analysis, and just not take that first step. So I'm just going to make sure I've got my timer running here so I don't go over. Okay, so have a good communications plan for the targeted change and the final state, the destination, and take the time to develop it well. This is we keep hearing this repeatedly from those that have been through this process, people like Jeff Graham, and those that have worked closely with him, like Peter Coldrake, who's working now with excellence in breeding. I mean, the plan and the communications around it is the basis for change management. We need to have it well understood. If people don't understand the plan, then it's going to be difficult to implement. Following from that, planning is critical. It's a new way of working. Take the step in the dark and move forward. So take the time to do it well. Change means different things to different people, and so it's important to highlight the new opportunities and bring the staff on board. And this links well to the next point, to provide the career opportunities. Sometimes as change is happening, a lot of people just due to their personality and their nature will think of things in the context of how things are for them right now, and they get a little bit stuck in terms of seeing the opportunity, because all they see is that things are closing in on their current way of working without necessarily seeing the opportunities that might be there for them to take a step into something a little more different or a little broader, or maybe a little more specific than what they're currently working. But helping them to see that will facilitate the process. So for excellence in breeding, we've taken a bit of a look back at what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well, and we've got a range of data sources. We look at from our conversations with each of you. We look at things coming out of the BPAT. We've recently been through an evaluation by the CG Advisory Services team. We have feedback sessions, and we've held some surveys recently, which I'll talk about the outcomes of those. Right now, I'll talk about that. So we've had a stakeholder feedback survey. We had 87 responses from research assistants and managers and breeders. And we really do thank you for everyone who participated in this, because it really does help us to serve you better. And that's what we're here for. I mean, we only have
Michael, you're fading in and out a little bit.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Bish. Is this a little better?
Yeah, that's better now. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and hold my mic up a bit closer. Yeah, it's really important for us to understand from you, from the people who are here to support, how we can do things better. So we really appreciate it. So just taking a bit of a dive into what we learned from these surveys is, in general, there's a good understanding of the goals of breeding and the support that we provide. I mean, these green bars means that it's very true. So they're all pretty high. The lowest one was this one, but that's still relatively. Can I just ask that people put their mics on mute?
Yeah, we'll try and mute people from this end, Michael, but your sound is still fluctuating a little bit.
Should I take my video off? Is it an internet problem or a mic problem, do you think?
Maybe try switching the video off. Let's see if that helps.
Okay. I'll do that now. Let me know. Is that helping a little? You let me know if it helps. Or if I try something different, I can unplug the mic and see if that helps. The next one, the one that was lowest here is that EiB templates, forms and spreadsheets are clear and easy to use. So the majority of people said quite true, but very few people said very true. So this is where we really probably scored the lowest. And to be honest, this really is no surprise to us. We are generally a group of scientists, and we do acknowledge that we need to make this clearer and better. So we take this on board, and we are putting in steps to overcome this. And I'll talk later about what we're doing to respond to these various things that we're seeing. But first, I'll go through and make a summary. This is the other one that my organisation ensures EiB documents easy to find. Yes, that's a related one, and that wasn't quite as bad. But yes, so we need to work on those two areas. Okay, so improvement plans. What are the most significant barriers to implementing your improvement plan? Okay, so things that came out here is need clearer steps for priorities for funding support. Okay, so I can talk a little bit about the funding around improvement plans and how crops and hunger links with that shortly. And attention time of most of the key, this was the maize program staff are spread very thinly across multiple objectives and activities, and that's the case for really most of the programs. And the BPAT regularly acknowledges this. They call it the breeder's burden, and this is acknowledged that this is a problem that when we're talking about trying to implement change, that just keeping things running as they are is a big job. We do have to find a way to overcome this, but it's well acknowledged that this is a barrier. So lack of clarity about funding, I'll talk about that soon, and insufficient time, there are the two main points there. So, Bish, is the sound a little better now?
Yeah, it's a little bit better, Mike. Yeah, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe I'll just talk a bit louder. Turning feedback into actions to better support breeding programs. First of all, better coordination amongst modules and coordinated communication to the CG and NAS breeding teams. So we are meeting regularly to coordinate module outputs and engagement, and updating the core module objectives in our communications materials and on the website. When it comes to templates and explaining terminology, we are working to redesign templates to be less cumbersome. We will provide templates through Toolbox, and for the important ones, we will email out to the various breeding leads for awareness as well. We are defining, standardising and harmonising terminology across platforms, but also just in general, because there are many terms that we use that there are still different meanings floating around. So we're looking to tighten that up. And when it comes to the improvement plan, which is, I think, one of the areas where there's been the most difficulty in terms of being a little bit difficult to use. We are developing an improved version. It's not Excel based, and that'll be rolled out very shortly. It's in final stages of development. So I'm really quite excited about what that will be, the end product, and what it'll mean for supporting improved planning, which I talked about earlier in this talk. And around the clarity of funding, there will be a period of transition from centre-based to initiative-based funding, particularly for the pooled funding. So historically, Windows 1 and Windows 2 pooled funding has gone to centres, whereas going forward, it'll flow through the initiatives. It's been called non-designated, whereas designated, I think, is what they're referring to as Windows 3 and bilateral. So it's just a small change in terminology there. So I'll talk a little bit more about funding, but for crops to end hunger, we are working on an improved, more transparent approval process that of course includes inputs from the breeding programs, because it will largely be the breeding programs executing the projects and the plans. So just back onto the lack of clarity around funding. I assume that some of this is around the crops to end hunger money. I mean, in terms of operations, I mean, the operations of funding, which is depicted here by the green and the blue, this is funded by currently via the CRPs through the pooled funding and through projects via Windows 3 or bilateral projects, and that's the way it is going forward, and will remain that way. I mean, rather than CRPs going forward, it will be via the initiatives, but I mean, operations will be funded in that way. And this is a slide that I used from that I've been showing since haven't shown it so much recently, because I used it quite a lot in 2019, but this was developed in early 2019 and was shown quite extensively back then to make the point that modernisation really is largely about how the operations are done. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in terms of when we do a look forward. But when talking about improved accuracy through plotmanship or better data analyses and different biometric methods being used or different breeding schemes, these are largely how the breeding is done. And it's a very operational thing. And so the operations are funded by the pooled funding and the projects. Now, in addition, there is crops to end hunger funding, which is this red here on the top of the bars, which are really the one-off investments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But just before I move on from this graph, I really want to make the point that this transition of how the operations are done is the key, and it's and if you're looking for the crops and hunger funding to fund the operations, then that's not what it is for. And so I think possibly that is where part of the confusion might be. And the reason that the ratio of the green to blue changes over time is that the amount of funding that goes into the, say, a 2018 way of operating will slowly go down. There are some things that are just staple and will always stay that way. But as we move, say, towards shorter breeding cycle times and perhaps on-farm trialling and doing things differently, more of these operational resources will go to a new way of operating. So, like I mentioned before, the crop and hunger investments are for single point in time investments to make the transition, to support the transition of breeding programs to become more effective and efficient. So they're not for operations, not for salaries, not for expansion. The funds are intended to accelerate transformation, implement new technologies and tools, and facilitate improvements. And we at Excellence in Breeding are working on an improved and more structured and transparent process, like I mentioned before, and guidelines as well to make it clear what is in scope. And because there seems to be a lot of confusion around, like for example, if there's a plan to implement something that is a transformation, then there might be, for example, the staff salary is requested. Well, the breeding team presumably already has staff, and it's those staff that are expected to implement the transformation. And so if there are funds though that are required to shorten the cycle time, if there needs to be machinery or equipment or irrigation or field leveling or these sort of one point in time things, then that's what it's there to support. But I mean, what I just listed off is not an exhaustive list. We are, like I said, developing a fuller set of guidelines and a process so that it is clearer what these funds are there to support. Okay, so still on the surveys, we had a survey on the barriers to technology adoption and some key results, and we have some summary here according to from the NARS, from CG and together. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all, there's a lot of points here, I won't go through all of these, but these will be addressed in the adoption and outreach session when that comes along. So please join that session for more information on these. So what are some of the successes in overcoming some of these barriers? Not necessarily addressing barriers that might be specific to what Excellence in Breeding could be doing better, but these are overcoming some of the barriers generally across the system. So we've picked out 7 high-level barriers and pointed out what has been done and a success that has occurred in that space. So first of all, unclear targets. For the first time ever, we have a full inventory of 142 CG breeding pipelines along with investment cases. So that is along with the description of the hectares and tonnages and that are being targeted by each of those pipelines. We've never had this, and it is critically important as we start to take a single breeding organisation view of CG breeding as we move to 1CG. In terms of inconsistency, we've got now development of standardised methods for calculating realised and predicted genetic gain. This is a big step forward so that we can all be talking the same language and also shift our focus to have a really critical look at what the predicted and realised genetic gain is. Predicted genetic gain is just looking at the components of the breeder's equation, acknowledging that realised genetic gain is a lagging indicator. And there are some very good things that have been put in place that won't change the realised genetic gain for some years yet. Okay, skills gap. We've got the launch of the Breeding Operation Network for Development. This is the acronym for that is BOND, and Training and Adoption Network. Acronym there is TRAIN. For for unclear roles, we've developed a CG-NARS partnership model, which has been instrumental in the development of planning for breeding under 1CG and particularly the accelerated breeding initiative under genetic innovations. Lack of centralized data management. We've been investing for some time in this, and EiB is recently now fully managing the development of the enterprise breeding system, but we're also investing through IBP currently in the breeding management system. And going forward, this is all, and we're also coordinating use of breed base as well. And going forward, all of this is going to come under the N4X initiative, the Network for Enabling Tools, Technologies and Shared Services initiative under 1CG. Lack of clarity. Breeding Informatics Network defines best practices for experimental design, stage 1 analytics, genomic selection, and more. So there really are big steps forward in this space as well. And access issues. If we look at the mid-density genotyping platform, this is being accessed by 54 institutes across 31 countries. 54 CG and NARS institutes in 31 countries. So really, before I move on to looking forward, the final point I want to make as we look back is to say that we have a whole team in excellence in breeding which is dedicated to your success. And this is our team here, some of the faces of our team on the page. So we're here for your success, and that's what we're here for. So please reach out and utilize this resource, this team. Okay, Bish, how long have I been going for?
You've got about another 10 minutes left, Michael. Your sound still fades in and out sometimes. Maybe you might want to unplug your earphones if that helps.
Is this any better? Can you hear?
Yeah, at the moment that's better already. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. I'll bring this closer. All right, I'll try it like that then. Okay, so looking forward, we've got the 6 funders requests, which I mentioned last night. I won't go through each of them individually again, as important as they are, because I'm going to run out of time. Progress is, sorry, let me just see if I can get rid of this thing up here. Okay, so progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So this is another quote. And so, yeah, let's be mindful of the way that we're thinking about our breeding. So as we're thinking about it, as we look from where we've come from to where we're going, the direction that breeding is taking in the CG, it's worth acknowledging that past CG breeding efforts have been successful and are continuing to have success. So it's not to say that that's not the case, but at the same time, there are opportunities to modernise and increase the effectiveness and capacity of breeding efforts. And opportunities exist to consolidate and centralise activities that can be done regionally or globally, opportunities that didn't exist until now as we move into 1CG. And this is what the N4X initiative is really all about, is taking that opportunity. There are 2 key areas to driving progress, and that's acknowledging that there's operational excellence and there's scientific excellence, and separating out the 2 and ensuring that we've got excellence in each is really important. If you bring these 2 together and try to manage them together, then it really is hard to optimize each. I mean, operational excellence is about the operations of breeding and getting your plots ran and sown and harvested and good plotmanship and the phenotyping. Scientific excellence is about the science of breeding, and that includes phenotyping as well, of course, but not the operational side of it. Opportunities exist to manage across centres and crops. This is what we're moving towards with the GI management structure, and and for breeding, this is the accelerated breeding initiative, which will be managing breeding across CG, across centres and crops. And opportunities exist to integrate new science like genomics, analytics, double haploids that will bring change to the way breeding is done. And future selections will be based on a combination of genotypic and phenotypic data to enable radically different breeding schemes. So if we take a bit of a look at how these breeding programs or breeding schemes even are going to be different going forward, it doesn't have to be so complex. I mean, if we bring it back to first principles, breeding is not so complicated, really. We just need to make sure we're doing each piece well. So starting out, we must have clear targets, and this is really what the Market Intelligence and Product Profile Initiative is about. That's the MIP there. That's what that stands for, and the Accelerated Breeding Initiative has a whole work package on refocus. So MIP will be looking at the opportunities and what products are needed to have impact in each market segment and to take those opportunities. And the refocus work package within Accelerated Breeding will make sure that breeding programs are oriented and structured to take use of that. So looking at the target population of environments, making sure that they are that within a TPE, which is a group of environments that are similar to one another, that there aren't drastically different environments, that market segments are well defined, and that each breeding pipeline is targeting both the market segment and target population environments. And the market segment are the people needing approximately similar products. If we're breeding from the same breeding pipeline for radically different products that are requiring different genetics, then we're going to be over-delivering to some and under-delivering to many. So having that alignment between the breeding pipeline and your market segments is critical. And defining the target product profile. This is the description of the products that will be successful in a target market segment. So this is what it means, just to give a bit more detail, to have clear targets. The first principles, we have an elite gene pool. These are the parental lines, your elite lines that have high genetic breeding value for the target market and TPE. So obviously it's going to be very specific to that target market and TPE. Phenotyping, the ability to identify superior progeny. This is, that how we do it well can get complicated, but at a high level, it's very simple. And this is what we're going to be tackling this in accelerated breeding, but also with the support of the N4X initiative. The N4X initiative will be there to provide the services and support and technology and tools. And so I guess we'll be using the tools, but they'll be providing in many cases, the technical support as well. Excuse me. Okay, so and this all needs to be supported by infrastructure and processes. So the infrastructure and processes need to be able to produce high quality, pure, clean seed, enable excellent plot quality and collection of high quality phenotypic data. This is about your plotsmanship, generate good quality genotypic data. And for many of these, if the infrastructure is not in place, this is what the crops and hunger investments are there to support. And partnerships. If we, like I said last night, we go further together, we can achieve all of the above much better, and we go further. Maybe we go faster alone, but we go further together. And we've got a whole work package in the Accelerated Breeding Initiative called Transform, which is looking to do this. And of course, the breeding scheme brings it all together. So just looking at the breeding scheme part, what does a modern breeding scheme look like? Well, first it starts with taking a population improvement approach. And this is to say that rather than starting out with making a cross to develop a product, which means that you look at each cohort of lines or each crossing block as its own cohort that you're trying to extract a variety from. Rather than do that, we're trying to just improve the population and extract improved varieties from that improved population. And the difference between the two is mostly a change in mindset. And as this change in mindset occurs, then what tends to happen is that cycle time, accuracy, and attention to genetic diversity get prioritized over selection intensity, over this thinking of trying to capture that one in a million recombination event. And this is really what the Accelerate work package in accelerated breeding is all about, and will be supported by N4X. Then getting to stage 1 testing as quickly as possible, because I mean cycle time is one of the fastest way, or one of the more powerful ways to increase genetic gain. And then once you get there quickly, to select parents early. So rather than selecting parents from a 3rd or 4th year of testing, but to ensure that your stage 1 testing is accurate enough, and that's the next point, to be able to select parents immediately. So that means having trials in the TPE and the representative of the TPE, using genomics, good plotsmanship, making sure that you've got highly relevant trials, that your on-station trials are representative of what's happening in farm, these sorts of things. So again, this is what the Accelerate work package is about, and supported by N4X. And actively managing genetic diversity, because as you're shortening the cycle time and doing these things above, then the system can become a little more subject to drift, and so attention needs to be given to genetic diversity. And so
we've got about a minute left, Michael.
Okay, all right, I'll run through this. Okay, so in each of this, I've been pointing to, in these last few slides, I've been pointing to different areas in which we make the connection to the initiatives under 1CG and specific work packages. So this is just really just a snapshot, but I really do encourage you to take this slide deck and go on this link. I'll share this slide deck. It'll be on the web page, and go to this link and review the deliverables that are laid out in the, particularly in this case, probably the accelerated breeding and the N4X initiative, and review sections 6 and 7 to look at the deliverables, the outputs and outcomes, because these describe what CG breeding teams will deliver in the next 3 years. So being aware of that up front is going to be critically important. And we're going to have a town hall on the 2nd of December to run through some of the details for any of those of you who are interested in a more detailed look at what that proposal is setting out to do. So, okay, so change is a process, not an event. I'll go through this one. And so I will finish off with this slide that I had last night, because I really want to come back to it and just challenge everybody listening today to think through, or particularly those of you that I'm talking to from CG and NAR's breeding programs, to think about what are the 3 things that you will take from this event and implement to create change toward increased genetic gain and variety turnover. Because like I said at the beginning, this is what we're here to achieve. This is what excellence in breeding is about, but we can't do it without you. You're the ones that are implementing it. We're just supporting you. So for you to be able to take something from this week and really own it and say, these are the 3 things, or more if you like, but it's nice to at least pin down 3 things to commit to that you're going to implement to create change and increase genetic gain, variety, turnover. So with that, I really do thank you for your time. It's been an honour to have the opportunity to be in front of you today, and that I'll hand it over to you, Bish. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. A very insightful presentation. So if there are questions for Michael will be part of the panel that'll be online in a few minutes. So please save your questions for Michael. You can post them in the chat, or you can ask them live. So with that, we'll move on to the next presentation, and that is coming from Steffen Weber. So as I mentioned earlier, Steffen is the program manager for EBS. He's also a change management consultant and has driven a lot of change management projects in industry. So with that, Steffen, I'd like to invite you to the floor, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody hear me okay? Good. Well, let me share my screen. And also let me know if you see my screen.
We see it.
So, good. Okay, going into presentation mode. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak, first of all. And this is a great opportunity. Very happy to report a little bit what I've been doing with CG in the past year. Just quickly about myself. When the pandemic started off, I basically started my own consulting business, and that was in April 22, no, 20, April 20. And the first project I basically ran with CG is now really almost exactly a year ago, where I started to work with the cassava folks. By now, as Bish said, I'm basically the interim manager for the EBS program, but I'm also running a project on product profile management with the cassava team with NextGen. So I have an industry background. I'm a trained plant breeder, so I know quite a bit of what you're talking about. And throughout my career, I have been both driving change, but I also have gone through change myself quite a bit, both personally and also professionally. And this is basically through my industry career, I collected on the sideline of my breeding experience and training, I collected quite a bit of experience and practices around change management. So just to level with you, to basically think about where you are with your changes. Well, as in many other scientific disciplines, the way we do plant breeding today is changing. So we're going from basically individual heuristics and empirics, where a single breeder actually was a dominant person, to really a team approach. And I call this collaborative diagnostics and prediction. But this is basically what's happening. It's pretty much, when I say other disciplines, that's what happens happened in medicine. 30 years ago, you went to your doctor, he looked at you, he could tell you everything. Today, your doctor sends you to X specialist to take tests, etc., and you're bringing the data together. That is exactly what is happening in breeding as well. So this is basically the world you're living in, and Michael very nicely described the targets and the challenges. I made a few notes. I want to make sure to connect to what Michael said as well. But let me go through this first. So there's actually, this is a quote. I tried to reconstruct where I got it from by Googling it. I must have picked it up somewhere in a talk or something like this. I didn't find it, but I find it very intriguing. So there's actually no way to get the wrong change right, but there are 1,000 ways to get the right change wrong. So when I saw the slide yesterday in the intro session about the gap that is existing of the predicted need for food from the two major crops that we're talking about, maize and wheat, the gap to basically the prediction of what climate change will do. This is basically the business case for EiB. You have to drive change, and this is also basically probably the reason being for CG. You have to drive change. The way we do breeding today will not allow us to meet that challenge, and it's a huge one. So this is really to remember that this is certainly the right change, but there's quite a risk to it to get it wrong. When I submitted the first draft to what I'm going to talk to, basically I presented well, a collection that was tackling all of the three major drivers for change, or the areas of change. So you have the technical change, which is basically what will change. Very important, the change delivery. But then you have the blue cogwheel, the behavioral and cultural change. You could also call this human change, but that sounds a bit harsh. But in relationship to technical change. So I will focus today on the blue cogwheel. on the behavioral and cultural change. But what the EBS team went through very much, and I could basically extend that lecture here quite a bit, is we work very hard on what will change. So Michael was talking about that clarity and unclear targets are sometimes an obstacle to change. This is what you need to accomplish there, to really describe very clearly where are you coming from and where do you want to go to. Though that is what is about the technical change. When it comes to change delivery, Michael mentioned problems like inconsistency, unclear roles, etc. But also basically inconsistency, unclear roles. This is what you basically tackle in change delivery, and this is pure discipline. This is where project management, program management comes in, but also a little bit of organizational design. How do you set up the teams, etc., and basically how do you pursue the change per se. But now coming to the blue cogwheel, the human change or behavioral and cultural change. This is basically two critical questions that need to get answered. Why should people change? And then the second question, can we change? And this is a bit relating to what Michael said about skill gaps. This is very much about, can we change? So you need to have the right competencies in place. But also then lack of clear or central data management. This is about how you set up the environment that you basically facilitate a change. And then well, the access issues is the same thing. So this is the behavioral and cultural change requires quite a number of things to create the circumstances that allow people to change. And that is what I will be focusing on in my talk. So going back to a business case, this talk here is not only personal experience, it's also quite a bit digging into what's out there in literature. One thing that I found is basically the risk of changes and especially big changes failing, like company reorganizations, etc., is as high, can be as high as 50%. And this is basically from a group that observed and studied a number of cases in industry and other organizations as well. And when you look at basically, okay, change management, very fuzzy term. When you look at your investment into change, so basically the funds that are provided to basically make a change that is desired, say you have a risk of failing of 50%. So this could destroy half of your investment. The investment that you would need to make in really professional change support is quite low, but it increases tremendously the value that you can safeguard. So that at the end, it's probably you always need to calculate some friction, but professional change management support can really help you to safeguard your investment that you make in the beginning. And this is basically the business case for really thinking strategically about change. Now, going forward, again, this is an unsighted quote here, but this is from a dear colleague from Syngenta when I was just about to start to lead an enterprise-wide IT program there. A dear colleague told me every transformation is personal. So this it is about people. And the other aspect that you also need to consider is every transformation is local. It always, despite the fact you have very ambitious targets that apply to everyone, everybody and everywhere the change needs to happen. Otherwise, your transformation will not be successful. So it is personal and it is local. And to take a look into this, another quote that I got from a Syngenta colleague when I started another IT project there was, yeah, change always sucks. Well, I wouldn't go that far, as you can see going through that one. But one thing to really remember is going through change is an emotional roller coaster for anybody. And in any circumstance, what you see here is the change curve, where you basically see over time how morale, confidence, energy, the mood basically changes. And this curve was originally developed by a scientist named Kübler-Ross, who studied basically near-death experiences and grief. And that's what she found people go through. But when you basically add a little bit experience around general change management, this curve applies. So you start always out with a shock to the system, which is your first reaction. Then you come to terms where you basically you observe resistance, but you also see realization, and then you're finding your feet. This is the response, and basically the new normal is the reform that you went through. And the personal roller coaster is, I put some quotes in there that could apply. You can all read this, but you're going really through a roller coaster. And this is not only true for the people who have to change, this is also true for people who need to lead the change, because they change with the population they're supposed to lead. So this is really important to consider for any leader. And talking about leadership, this is one of the first things that you need to remember is at the end, you're always looking at the personal growth. So anybody going through a change at the end basically grows in terms of experience, in terms of competence, in terms of confidence, or even in terms of energy. You could probably add a number of other features, but at the end of a successful change, there's always a personal growth. Of course, you have situations where you say, I just quit. I get out of here. I made such decisions personally myself, where I said, okay, I don't want to be part of this, so this is okay. But this is also a learning, but probably not as much as when you go through the whole way. It gives you other learnings for sure. Okay, so how actually dissecting behaviors or behavioral and cultural change? Well, also this here I can very warmly recommend a good read. The book Influencer, The Power to Change Everything, from Pedersen et al. And they have, at least for me, they put this in a very simple format. So you remember when you saw the cogwheel slide, it is all about the motivation. Why should we change, or why should I change? And then the other important thing to get right is the ability. So can we actually change? And it is not only those two items here, but it is also important for a successful change management to consider all three levels on which change happens. So on the first level, you remember when I said every transformation is personal, you have the personal level. That is the individual. Then you have a social level. This is the team. Surely you're changing whole organizations, so you change complete teams. So you need to see to it that the teams can actually also basically are motivated and can be able to change. And last but not least, you have the structural level, which is the organization. And you have to answer a few very candid questions. So on the personal level, regarding motivation, how can you basically ensure that people take a personal satisfaction out of the change? So being clear about the benefits of changing is really important. On the social level, you probably want people to look for role models, people who or teammates who are good at changing, who drag others along, are very important, and to basically motivate others. And then on the structural level, Michael was talking about the aligning incentives to the targets to increase genetic gain. This is exactly what needs to happen. But this is with regard to any change. You need to align the incentives that you give and the rewards. I have a slide on that later, how you can do that technically. When you get to the ability, you can ask similar questions. So on the individual level, it's very easy. How can you make sure that people are trained on the new capabilities and that they can operate actually successfully in the new culture, in the new environment, in the new setup? A little bit more fuzzy and difficult probably is the social level. So how can you make sure that people use the social capital that is existing? So leaning on their teammates basically to learn. Peer-to-peer coaching is a good term that can be used there. So, but that also means you need to develop such coaches as well. And last but not least, on the environmental or the structural level, you need to ensure that the environment is set up. So when Michael talked about the access issues being a problem, or the lack of clear and centralized data management, this is what you can do to shape the environment to enable the change that you want to achieve. Very simple one is also when you want to deploy an IT system and people do not have the right equipment to run it, your IT system will never make a difference because they just cannot run it. So this is what the environment area is about. So you saw from my intro slide, I live in Sweden. They have a saying which is things will be all right. Well, I'm German myself. A question that I ask myself: okay, who ensures to make things all right at the end? And mastering those changes is really the challenge for any organization. And you need to ask the who question. So when it comes to motivation, who ensures that? So on the personal level, leadership is very important. Communication as well. When you get to the social and structural level, you have basically HR coming in, but leadership is still an important factor here. And on the structural level, it's basically management who has to ensure that the incentives are generated and aligned. When it comes to the ability part, well, there's a few more entities being involved, but you see leadership in all three areas. This is really, really important. But then you have to build coaches and you have to set up good training and support functions. HR plays a role. You on the structural level, you need to really make sure that you have a very clear management of your change portfolio. This is in order to avoid that you make a change on one side, you make a change on the other side, and when it all comes together, it doesn't fit and it actually destroys the value. So aligning changes that are happening in different areas is really, really important as well. Now, when it comes to leadership, my advice here is develop empathetic, resilient, and motivating coaches. And this is not to develop change agents or change managers. This is basically what needs to happen for every leader. This is part of the day job that a leader needs to basically, a leader who leads teams or his team through changes, they need to be able to do all those things that I plotted here. So you need to understand people, you need to level with them. You need to encourage self-reflection. So what is the cost of not changing is a good question there. You need to engage people. So you need to engage them to be part of the change, to shape it. And when tough times come, you also need to be able to challenge people. So one thing that I got to hear was change or be changed, and well, that happens as well. And then, of course, encourage learning from others. And you probably all know the Chinese proverb here: when the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. This is really a motivating thing. Look for the others, how they do. So this is what leaders need to be able to do, leading people through change. Bish, you let me know when I'm going over time here.
Yes, Stefan, you've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I can do that. The other thing is building effective change teams. So you need to be strategic about systematic collaboration. This is a thing that the EBS team went through when I took on in April. We basically built a program organization with very clear roles, with clear boundaries between teams, clear roles and accountabilities, and this is the absolute basis where you work on. So this is also basically a discipline of delivering change. As you see the orange cogwheel here being involved as well. Now, another thing to be very clear about is benefits. So you remember the motivational part. You need to motivate people by basically clearly pointing out the benefits and then also measuring them. So you see here the ladder, how you get from a project output through building a capability to outcomes, and at the end the benefits you're after: increased genetic gain and increased variety turnover. Now, turning capabilities into outcomes is a matter of effective adoption, and turning outcomes into benefits is basically a matter of sustained use. Well, both of those are driven by behaviors of people, so their attitude to change, etc. So how can you influence behaviors at scale? Well, you need to measure things. Increased genetic gain, variety turnover, those are lag measures. When you see them, there's not much you can do about them anymore. So they are indirectly actionable. Easier to action are basically the lead measures, your processes. They are directly actionable and they are driving the lag measures. And well, if you build your rewards around actioning the lead measures here, acting on the lead measures, the rewards will drive the behaviors that you need to drive adoption and sustained use in the right way. The other thing that is important is be effective and strategic about stakeholder engagement. So say you have a technical change and you have different groups of stakeholders. Now, whether the change is a benefit or disbenefit for those stakeholder groups is basically the result of what is their influence over the program, what is their interest, and what is their attitude to the program. And it also does matter whether they're internal or external. At the end, it's basically their perception that drives if they perceive a change as a benefit or disbenefit. So this is very important to consider on change communications. You don't want to do the corporate everything is nice type of communication. You need to level with people and understand them. And the last thing I want to bring up is you need to be strategic about competency development. So this is the training piece, the we can part of the change. Start out with defining the competencies. So based on the future state of operations, really be clear about what are the knowledge, what are the skills, what are the behaviors that are needed in the new setup. And then you go to the next step and you basically define target levels. So people can have different levels of knowledge, skills, and behaviors. This can be basic, this can be proficient, this can be advanced, it can be expert. Different people in different teams, probably you need to differentiate a little bit, but really define the targets. In the next step, you conduct a competency assessment. So you look at basically, or you identify and quantify the gap between what is needed in terms of competences in the future and how does the competence level of your staff look like at the moment. And when you have done this, you can basically go and define your training strategy. So based on the competency assessment, you define your training programs and your training deployment. And as I said, that was what I could tell you about the human change part, the behavioral and cultural change. There's much more to say about how to describe the technical change and to basically deliver the change. But I'm stopping here, and I thank you for your attention, and would be curious for any question that you might have.
Okay, thanks very much, Stefan. Another really insightful presentation with some really nice tips. So if there are questions for Stefan, and I'm sure there will be many, I have a few myself, let's please bring them to the panel discussion, which we will have in a few minutes' time after the next two presentations. So we are running a little bit over. We're about 10 minutes behind schedule, but we wanted to break it up a little bit. So we want to do a little poll, if the technology allows us to do that. So Stefan, if I may please ask you, there we go. So thank you very much, Solomon. So if you can you please go to www.menti.com. So if you just look in the chat, you will see the website there, and use code 8990-0777. And you will find two questions there. So I'll just give everyone a minute to get online and access the website. And whenever you're ready, please go ahead with the first question. Please put in a response. So which potential benefit of breeding modernization are you most confident that the CGIAR NAS will achieve? So getting some responses coming in. There we go. So it looks like it's kind of two areas that people are gravitating towards: a better leveraging and sharing of expertise across centers. So that seems to be a theme that's really resonating with everyone. And costs, more cost-effective operations. So that's two major areas. Okay, strange. Leveraging funding doesn't seem to feature very highly at all. Okay, thank you very much for that. That's quite insightful. So sharing experiences and best practices across centers seems to be very high on the list. Solomon, shall we move to the next question? And there's a little tip. If you want to move to the next question, you might find a bar at the top of your screen. I think it says something like move to the next question. So just please click on that and you'll get to the next sheet. So the second question is, what are the most significant barriers to implementing CGIAR NAS breeding, the CGIAR NAS breeding agenda? Good question, Margaret. Okay, so culture is featuring quite high as a major barrier, and that resonates with some of the things I think Stefan and Michael were mentioning in their talk. So cultural change seems to be a big perceived impediment. Yeah, that's right, Hans. It was there. I thought Margaret's question was why no one else had voted for it. Okay, very good. I think we've had about 50 people respond. Thanks, everyone, for participating. I think, again, very clearly, I think culture seems to be very prominent in a lot of people's minds as we talk about driving change. And maybe this is something that we can start to bring out a little bit more in the panel discussion. So now, in the interest of time, thanks very much for participating in that survey. It's quite insightful, and we thought to break it up a little bit. We will now go into 2 case studies of implementation. So we're going to have an example from KALRO, which is a national program here in Kenya, and they will be talking about some of the changes they've successfully implemented and describe their experience here in KALRO. And then we will have a case study from IRRI, where our IRRI colleagues will be talking about the new OneRice strategy and how they've gone about implementing that strategy, which has been a big change to the rice breeding community. So with that, I'd first like to invite Felista Makini to start the presentation from KALRO. So welcome, Felista, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fish. Mine really is just to give some highlights, starting with how EiB and KALRO are engaging. We have a memorandum of understanding that started in January of 2021. And because the KALRO genetic gains, we feel they can be much better than they currently are. Therefore, we have a strong interest to collaborate with the EiB to strengthen those genetic gains. The other thing is the investment in the breeding program has been low. Therefore, the efforts by EiB have been very welcome, and we are really benefiting from that because KALRO is one of the focal NARES partner for EiB, one of the 3 pilot NARES. The KALRO maize and wheat are receiving the deep dive support, and we have the preliminary support that has been initiated for potato. And just to say that the EiB support is aligned to KALRO's Kenya's priority crops. So that is very, very valuable for us, that we are also on our priority crops, which means that the benefits are really going to be real benefits. The structured approach leading to customized support, the gap assessments, the crop-specific improvement plans, something which we are really benefiting from the EiB. We have received some digitization equipment, cost of operations, internet upgrade, irrigation support, capacity development training in various areas, and this is very much appreciated. And those issues that have been raised on change management are very, very important and critical for us to really focus. I really appreciate those 2 presentations. Because of time, I want to just hand it over to Joyce to do the rest of the presentation. And so I will allow her to present. I just thought I needed to just highlight on what we are doing with what you have been doing with EiB. Joyce.
Thank you very much, Felista. Yeah, Joyce, over to you. So Joyce, you are currently muted, Joyce, and can you just indicate, please, if you will share your presentation?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, can you share my presentation, or go right ahead and?
Yeah, would you like me to share it? I can do that.
Yes, please. I would like that. Thank you, Dr. Makini, the DDG crops of KALRO. I'm honored to speak after you, actually. And as the presentation is coming on board, indeed, I want to recognize that the target today, as we speak, we are talking about inspire, implement, and impact. And I'll be sharing a little bit of how jointly together working with the EiB, KALRO has been able to modernize its breeding programs and the 2 years of collaborative efforts that have passed. Allow me the next presentation, please. Next slide. I don't know if I can do this. Bish, slide.
Yes, sorry, Joe. I'm trying to advance the slide. I'm having a bit of difficulty. Just give me a second.
I can remove my video. Perhaps it will help.
Let me stop share and try that again. Sorry about this. Let me just try and share my screen. Maybe that will help. Sorry, Joyce.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, yeah, thank you. I think by way of introduction, I would like to say that the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization, also known as KALRO, is actually the public research organization in Kenya mandated to do research. And our mandate is to contribute to the growth of the agriculture sector through research, coordination, regulation, technology, and innovation development. Jointly working with EiB under the EiB NAS mandate, there is to support the modernization of NAS, national breeding programs, through the provision of tools, services, and technical support. So this presentation is really going to talk about those collaborative efforts that have taken place between and by EiB with KALRO. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Joyce, I'm struggling to advance the slides. Solomon, I wonder, would you be able to help here? I will try once more. I apologize, everyone, and Joyce. Okay, Joyce, can you see this? When I put it in slide mode, it goes into difficulties.
Okay,
would this be okay?
Yeah. Okay. Make it bigger. Can you make it bigger? Plus.
Yes, I should be. Is that okay?
A bit more. That's good. I think that's fine. Yes, I wanted to discuss about program assessments that have taken place in KALRO and some of the barriers and the improvement plans that have resulted. For us in KALRO, we actually have had the benefit of having 2 programs, the Maize Highland Breeding Program led by Dr. Dixon Ligeo, who is located at Kitale, where I have been. He has been, or he continues to be, our national maize coordinator. But we mentioned Maize Highland Breeding because it barely has funding from anyone. There's very limited support for this particular breeding program, yet it supports significantly at least 70% of the maize seeds that are found within Kenya. Additionally, the second program that was assessed was the Njoro wheat breeding program that is being led by Dr. Godwin Macharia, who's also the center director of KALRO Njoro. KALRO Njoro actually is predominantly the lead in wheat breeding in Kenya, and it is quite renowned also within East Africa. Both of this, the wheat program work with CIMMYT, and I will be mentioning them. What came out from the assessment is that initially when integrated breeding program and excellence in breeding approached KALRO with a view to assisting change the way that breeding is done. Of course, our breeding has been manually done and our data has been collected and kept in files, and of course in personal computers. There was conservatism. I think that is understood. The greatest fear, just a minute, go back to the other slide, please. Yes, the greatest fear was the fact that they could that is to be understood, even as sitting scientists. But with engagement, that was, the scientists were able to feel like, yes, let's test this, and with the support of our managers, who are, of course, on this platform. Currently, the potential breeding program is being assessed, and I'll be sharing very briefly about the improvement plans and the priorities that have been identified. Next slide, please, Bish. Yes, I think this is one of the benefits that we saw. The digitization of the breeding program and the adoption of the breeding management system, hereafter I'll call it BMS adoption for the rest of you. If you look at the Maize Highland breeding program to the right, you will see that data for 1997 to 2020 trials for both OPV, preliminary trials and advanced trials, 24 years of data. If you can see my arrows where I've written browse studies, all this data is now within the system, and it can be accessed at whatever time. This is data that was in files on computers, but now it's on a specific BMS site. And apart from that, as with assistance of excellence in breeding, genetic gain analysis has been done for yield, disease tolerance, and even moisture. For wheat breeding, less lower levels have been reached, because we're talking about 2014 to 2020 trial data and NASA data. Currently, any data that's generated is on BMS for both programs, and that is really a big step. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is really very important. But as I also talk about this, I want to say that trainings and have been received, and full adoption of BMS has taken place, both online and practically. At Njoro, this happened between 19th to 21st July 2021, where 29 scientists were trained. In Kitale, this was 3rd to 5th August 2021, where 9 scientists were trained. And in KALRO, Tigoni, between 16th and 18th August 2021, where 9 scientists were trained. These scientists are trained alongside with their technicians, because at the end of the day, it's the technicians actually who do the day-to-day running. The DDG Crops has talked about equipment, and if you look at this table that I'm trying to highlight, you will see that we've been able to support, EiB has supported at least 5 different centers on maize being sorghum programs, wheat, soybean programs, rice programs, and potato programs across the country, and at least a package printer, seed counters, label printers, and handheld data collectors. 16 of them actually have been given, worth $90,000. We appreciate very much EiB. Next slide, please. I want to say that as the slide is being changed, that yes, these equipment are not just for storage, they are being used, and the staff have incorporated the use of this equipment within their programs. We also have benefited from the adoption of genotyping. The focus has been on F1 parents, particularly quality assurance and QTL profiling of key lines. Why is this important? Because anything that has now been profiled means that at least we know and what we have. And in the event somebody by mistake or by chance happens to poach, let me use that word, KALRO lines, we are able to identify and back and say, no, these lines belong to KALRO. This is big business, and we as public sector recognize that, just like private sector does. So really, this is so big for the country to be able to do this. And to date, we have had at least 376 wheat samples genotyped with 70 SNP markers, and 94 maize samples genotyped with 95 SNP markers. We also have other QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control for breeding. Any breeding start is now for wheat and maize actually is going through QA/QC. We are also having plans to purify and identify identifying markers that are crossing key traits. What is important is it's only when we did this QTL profiling and the QAQC that we found out that actually some of the breeders had materials which were not hybrid. The materials were the same.
Joyce, you're breaking up a little bit, just to let you know. Yeah, your sound is breaking up a little bit, Joyce.
Okay, is that better? I hope that's better. Is that better?
Yeah,
so
much better.
Why this page? I would like to stay on this slide and say that the impact of being able to know that you have a true hybrid early enough, even not so late in the day, and finding out actually when this QAQC was done, it was found out that actually some of the new lines were not different, and they also impure lines were found. You know, this is so important and now for quality control, and we are hoping that it can be incorporated later. Next slide, please. Next slide. One of the other benefits that the EiB program collaboration has done is the internet upgrade. When you're in the West, you may not think this is important. I know that we are here with India and Africa, and you understand the complexities and the challenges of internet access. Just because of this collaboration, we've had increased bandwidth, and both at Njoro and at Kiboko, we appreciate very much an increase in network coverage, and additionally, also added controls for security and reduced misuse. Thank you so much. Next, please. As another benefit has been the costing of breeding programs. I talked about this last year, and now I just want to talk about it again using this table, this graph that you can see. It's very interesting that KALRO supports a lot of international and other national and other company breeding programs. They bring on board these teams, they support them. If you look at this upper graph, you'll see that this particular graph constitutes the heavy cost that goes to KALRO, actually, that accrues to KALRO because of supporting such programs. If you look at the table on the below it, there is a much more emphasis brought out to evaluate by row. For example, just assessing hand crossing nursery, it costs about $23 per an 18-meter row. It will cost you that much. The selfing nursery, an 18-meter row will cost $20.11 US per row. Isolation crossing block, 18-meter row, 13.41. On station trials for 5-meter row, 8.61. It's a lower cost and the row is short. But if you do a similar row off station of 5 meters, it will cost 14.26 because of using per diems for staff and travel and fuel. So this becomes very, very important for management when they are planning and budgeting, and for the breeders themselves, being able to know where to put emphasis, and when they are even developing proposals, where to put money. Rather than previously where we assumed costs. In fact, some of my team members here, Director Crop Systems, will tell you, yes, we have been assuming that we take averages, but with the EiB cross-breeding program that is developed by University of Queensland, we have a much more precise tool. Please, next slide. We'd like to appreciate the impact and the input of Crops to End Hunger. These investments have been, and you had earlier on when Michael was presenting, very specific towards Kiboko, KALRO Kiboko, where there's been an irrigation upgrade supporting at least 8 hectares for breeder seed maintenance. KALRO Kiboko is also where CIMIT maize has a lot of investment there. ICRISAT also has some work there, really. It's dry land, and so this 8 hectares is really going to be of benefit to both KALRO and to the CGIAR CIMIT program. Similarly, at KALRO Kakamega, where CIMIT is doing a lot of maize screening and also sweet potato disease screening is phenotyping platform exists, there will be an upgrade for foliar disease phenotyping. So we appreciate that. In general, KALRO is one of the organizations that has been identified for core breeding hubs, and specifically 3 research stations have been identified. And these will be KALRO Kiboko for drought phenotyping, for maize and dryland cereals, Njoro for the global wheat rust screening and data management hub, and Kakamega for key testing for multiple crops such as maize, cassava, sweet potato, millets, and beans, and disease hotspots. Next slide, please. What's next? And what are KALRO's priorities for modernization? You've had the DDG crops speak at the beginning and appreciating what the EiB has done. But looking back, I want to say that we are very grateful, EiB, for what has happened. And I've heard Michael say that, yes, the funding has been really specific to specific things like equipment, tools. But I think on behalf of management, I am just kindly requesting that if there could be direct funding to support research activities, especially operational funding to support some of our breeding pipelines. Some breeding pipelines don't even have any funding at all. We are looking at things like TEF, which are incoming crop varieties that are so important to northern Kenya. Things like maize, the maize highland breeding program for a long time has not had any money, yet it supports quite a lot of highland maize that is used even in Uganda and Tanzania. I see so strongly the need of that direct funding to us. And then apart from that, as lead of quality control in KALRO, I would love to see quality assurance, quality control analysis mainstreamed within KALRO breeding programs. We should at least be able to support 15 programs that can be able to have QA, QC analysis. Not only, of course, from donors, but also from government. Because if you don't start right, and I had said earlier on, that we noted that during the trainings and the assessments, QA, QC analysis, that some of the breeding target products were useless. Why waste all that money when we can do it right and do it properly? And as Michael said earlier on, knowing early enough that you have a good product, testing it early, and allowing national program to be also an equivalent, a competitor to international CG programs. So better you get up and end up with a good food security program globally. And looking at things like grain, legumes, beans, mung beans, pigeon peas, and root and tuber and banana crops, the cassava, sweet potato, and the banana. I know you people will be saying, yes, yes, we would like to see that done apart from maize and beans. We're also interested very, very much, and DDG crops, if she says one word, she'll only say, yes, Joyce, we want QTL profiling of all KALRO germplasm lines and varieties. Incorporating this data also, the data management softwares across all crops and livestock. We've heard of BMS. We also have other data managements that we're using in ICRISAT, in cassava, in sweet potato. For us as national programs, we are saying we need a data management software that is easy for us to use. We don't want to be switching to and fro. Now we are doing sweet potato. We have this data management. Sorry, you said to be frank. I'm just being blunt. Give us a data management system that we can consistently use across our crops. We'll be very, very happy. And finally, the issue of staff continuity. For us, we are limited right now in being able to bring in young interns on board to be trained because of policies that currently exist. However, I see an opportunity where a donor can be able to support us to hire young interns who can be trained. We have people like Dr. Ligeo, who remain very few years and then they exit. They've been trained on EiB, they have this concept, they understand it, change management has happened, they're using it. And as in any organization, they must go home because they must retire. But if we are supported to hire young interns, these interns can pick up and be trained on this EiB and also benefit from the knowledge of outgoing and senior scientists such as Dr. Ligeo. So that the continuity of EiB is long-term, that we are talking about 20, 30 years, the impact that we are talking about will have happened. I think on that point, as I come to the end of my presentation, I would like to acknowledge our partners. First of all, Excellence in Breeding Platform, the integrated breeding platform. You forced us actually, and you challenged us. We were long and slow, but I think we have run away with this, this knowledge. And I would say that we have become the change makers. We have changed. And our international CGs like CIMIT, CIAT, SIP, IRRI, IITA, you are many. I cannot name all of you, but above all, KALRO management for allowing me to make this presentation. Thank you so much and God bless you.
Okay, thanks very much, Joyce, for that very frank presentation as always. So that's Joyce Malinga, Director of Quality Control and Performance Management at KALRO, and prior to that, Dr. Felista McKinney, the Deputy Director General of KALRO. So thanks very much for that presentation. A lot of projects going on involving a lot of change in KALRO. So I'm sure there will be some questions for you in the panel discussion. Apologies, Joyce and everyone, that the slides didn't work out quite as we had hoped. We'd now like to move to the final presentation before we move into the panel discussion, and that is coming from IRRI. So I'd like to invite Sankalp and Sharifa to the floor. And Sankalp, please indicate if you will share the slides directly from your end. It might be helpful today.
Thank you, Bish. I will try to share from my end. If it doesn't work for some reason, Sharifa would do so. Yes. Thank you again.
Okay. So good day, everyone. So today me and Sankalp, we are trying to attempt a duet presentation, basically representing the breeders team from IRRI and also the operation team from IRRI. So we want to talk about the development and implementation of OneRice Breeding Strategy. Yeah. So next slide. So before, Sankalp, go ahead. You're mute.
Do you still see the panel above, or you're asking me to?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Good. So I think Sharifa mentioned, I think we would like to let you know how the changes have been implemented in one of sister CG organizations here. We have been also I'm thankful to EiB for allowing us to share some of those experiences. As we have seen in the Menti poll, that sharing the internal experience has been also basically ranked quite highly. So I think it's a good opportunity for all of us to see where some of the programs have had chances to start some of the changes we spoke about earlier than otherwise. So as one can expect, before the strategy and before the alignment of the framework that we are currently using for rice, there was no common or unified breeding framework which tied everything together. We had, as a result, also no formalization of market segments and the product concepts which one can develop from that. And there was a heavy project dependence. If you see a lot of activities were then project centric, and depending on if these initiatives are not backed by the level of funding that is required to mainstream them or institutionalize them, you definitely see a lot of swaying going around. A lot of objectives are not connected to each other. You definitely see a lot of redundancies. There were also, as a result, no centralized operations such as where you could do a pre-breeding in one place. So that was also a big challenge. And people were doing a lot of work in their own workshops, basically. And also that was reflected very much in the breeding programs, because the harmonization of the philosophies and also the lifestyles, while you breed, it's very critical when you look at it from the organizational point of view. If you want to drive, and say that this is how we breed at a particular institution or organization, there was that piece missing. So definitely that led to, with our recent estimation on genetic gains, a clear, as clearly indicated, uneven breeding cycle lengths and variable rates of genetic gain, and which were, surprisingly or not surprisingly low. To be, aiming for our current productivity targets. Routine testing of the breeding cohorts, especially the new breeding cohorts, was not done in the TPEs. The concept of TP was articulated, but the way the testing was done was slightly, not how we could, use well to make the advancements, and parental selection for recycling. That was also a big challenge with that. And overall, I think in a nutshell, it was quite evident that the technology application was uneven, and it just results basically into people kind of working in silos, and it was kind of not seen as an end-to-end framework, because if you have an organization with several functions but everybody trying to work independently, you get this kind of situation. But I think the programs on their own were still very successful, but as Michael was speaking, I think the operational excellence could not then be achieved alone with these approaches. So as we understood that, we digested that, and I think we definitely wanted to are benefiting from the priming that is happening through one CGIAR effort across CGs and visions those are being laid out. I think it was a good time for us since 2019 basically to start looking at several of these initiatives that we had at IRRI, focusing on reducing cycle times, cycle lengths, and focusing on the low-hanging fruits for increasing rates of genetic gain. Also, the grants which supported our mainstream investments in breeding program, they came along, and I think it was quite clearly described, how the road could be, charted as we, moved along. Also, while doing so, while looking at the vision and thinking about working together and having a strategy, we worked very closely with our sister organizations, mainly with AfricaRISE, CIAT, and also very, a strong engagement with EiB. So we built that collective vision to address the barriers together. And naturally, the central service support that we have at IRRI, it's an extremely important, development at IRRI, where we could imagine the accountability of the breeding program lying in the hands of the breeder, but the operational part of these operations was then centralized and rested in the hands of IRRI. So that trust building was very critical when we were thinking about the vision. So it was articulated very well. And NARS breeding programs through the establishment of formalized NARS networks has also been been the priority for, and we continue to see that as the main aim as we go forward through these changes, because oftentimes we are very quick to suggest changes. A lot of them could be technical changes, sometimes solutions which may appear band-aid solution, but I think an integrated system where you would have, if you need to change the state, stage one, where the CG itself needs to, digest those changes or mainstream them and then bring them to the NARS. Two-step process should be also appreciated, because each step has a logistical, bearing to it. And I think the time element is basically what is important. So again, while doing so, critical to know is that and a lot of us have already, mentioned and know that, mindset is going to be a big challenge. And that was definitely a challenge for us, or is a challenge as well. And that leads into, variable understanding of these approaches and the changes those are happening, and thereby the buy-in as well as the management support is very critical. And I think we were lucky to have on some of our earlier interventions that support, but it's quite variable if you look across the board. And parallel work streams existed as a result of the situation before the strategy was mainstream. And also, I think important barriers are building the capacity to understand, to absorb the changes, to implement them. Visualizing a change is a first good step, but to really implement them with all the considerations around them, it's a altogether different ball game. It is rather easy to visualize it, but to internalize it, verbalize and industrialize those takes a lot of time. I think so. That's a consideration as well. So there are some specific challenges there. And COVID, basically, I must say that when we were at the peak of implementing all these changes, really COVID hit us badly. Everyone else has experienced the same challenge, and that delayed basically the timeline. If you look at the 1CG timeline, basically the first 2 years are really in COVID. very restrictive movement. So I think that definitely stopped us from interacting. Otherwise, how we could do, and some of the logistical issues were also brought forward. So again, those things would always remain for us as breeding programs to deal with, and those are organizational issues. They're technical, interpersonal. They are bigger issues, also social issues that we deal with. And I think it is important then to still continue to reinforce the partnership. So we have first ensured that that the teams understand that the situation we are going through is very different. I mean, you have the organizational change that one CG was embarking on. Then you have these technical changes; those need to be made in a program for program to be effective, to be a role model for itself as well as to the research partners. So those things really require a lot of logistics there, and hence leading by example was the thing. So the platforms internally, the research platform and the research operations platform, all the resources, showed people the value of working together and created ownership. And that was also reflected in the way teams were brought in, since it is quite important when the organization is undergoing such a change to have space, a safe space for people to feel that they belong to the change, they have the ownership, buy-in, and then they could start to collaborate and even further. So I think those things were very, very important that we took care as we were moving along, and we're still dealing with them to a certain extent. We had several task forces aligned with the strategy and framework that we have envisioned. We had joint reviews and joint proposal development, both leading to some investments, which maybe could be capex investments or could be also larger projects following the same guiding principle. And definitely we follow the timeline. And I must mention here that some of the foundation that we could build our current progress on was built as early as 2014 at EIRRI. And I think basically the rest of the years where we're just capitalizing on that and making changes. So I think in 2018, we created this central service platform. Then we had a strategy to tie everything up, which is our OneRice Breeding Strategy and Framework, which we are guided by in our breeding programs. And then I think we are we are constantly mapping towards that in our breeding programs. Unification, harmonization of the effort has happened, but there's still a lot of work to do and a road to go. I think today we are at a stage where we are working very closely with Africa Rice and CF to also have a across the board alignment on this strategy. So it's going to be a continuous process. Coming to the strategy, I think what we think of is, it is a philosophy for us as we embarked on this change as, ensuring that this remains as an end-to-end product delivery and dissemination framework. So the OneRice Breeding Strategy and Framework was released with the intention of dealing with the barriers and challenges we have had at EIRRI. And also it was envisioned that a strategy such as this would be basically a particular, it's agnostic to a crop. Basically, you could visualize your own breeding program here, but also takes into account the previous efforts that were done and builds on that. So main component of this strategy is the product development happens based on the market demand, the market feedback, market segmentation we have had, and the product concepts guide that development. We have centralized pre-breeding, and in this strategy, every unit, research unit finds its space. If you look carefully, you would imagine yourself as well in one of these areas. And the product development happens with the CG, but the joint testing and engagement happens, at the NAR. So stage 1 onwards, there's no headquarter testing. All our early stage breeding trials are in the regions where we have currently close to 90 sites, and we, engage with the partners and move forward. Central service platform is a central piece of this strategy, and I think elite by elite breeding programs is the heart of the program. Rapid generation advance is the key, where the rapid fixation is achieved, and after the OYT, I think the parental selections are done, as well as recycling is quickly done to ensure that we recycle the elite parents from the breeding cohorts as the parents for the next cycle. So it is quite possible for us to implement this strategy, modify it as needed, because the rest of the challenges we have had are or have been addressed, and we are continuing to further, enhance this speed. As I mentioned, that the engagement with NARS here is the key focus, and this strategy allows us to basically pay more attention to effectivity of that engagement. So NARS engagement is not driven from where we sit at IRRI, but we have created hubs and spokes model where in South Asia, in East and Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as in Southeast Asia, we have teams who are working closely with the NARS to implement the approaches we have taken. In so far also that they continuously work with NARS for trialing as well as capacity building. So I think the communication is streamlined, has been very effective, and we are learning from our experience managing the expectation of the partners and expectations and the finding better ways to integrate their feedback is quite a priority for the program. So I think overall, it's an effective approach for NARS management. I think this is from my end. I would hand over now to Sharifa. Thank you.
Thanks, Sankalp. Next slide. Okay, so as Sankalp puts it, I think we one of the core input into the OneRice breeding strategy is the centralized breeding operations and shared services. This is where all the breeding operations are being operated by the operations team, which does not sit within the breeding team, but work very closely in developing the operations, the processes, in a very collaborative way with the breeders. So this is being developed so that the breeders can focus on science, leaving the operations or logistics to the shared services. And when all the activities are pooled, so to speak, so you also get economies of scale. So this leads to lower costs and also better utilization of the available capacity. This way as well, we improve efficiency because we can then do more work technically with less people. It also gives opportunities to standardize the way we work, which will generate quality output, and also implement quality management standards in all the processes. And by doing this as well, it creates an opportunity to create a system of planning. I think Michael talked about having a planning system in terms of moving forward. So that's what we have done as well, creating a system of planning, and which contributes to allowing us to do forecasting as well, which all of us know that with that you can then have budgeting and so on. And essentially all this leads to a professional system of service operations. Next slide. Next slide, Sankalp.
I think I hit the same issue as Bish earlier.
Okay, so do you want me to share?
I would unshare and I would try again, just a few seconds. Apologies for that, everyone. Okay.
Next.
No success, Sharifa. I think you may have to share.
Okay, let me try then. Okay. Share screen. Okay. So basically, Sankalp mentioned earlier that during the development of the OneRice strategy, we are doing the development jointly with Africa Rice, CGIAR, even members of the EiB. That shows that the thinking behind the development of OneRice is very cohesive with the needs of the partners as well. So now we are at a stage where we are developing programmatic alignment with all the 3 centers. And some of the focus areas for in the alignment is to align the market research and breeding pipeline, centralized pre-breeding, breeding program management, centralized services and mechanization, NARS breeding networks and capacity building, and also seed system. So essentially what we are doing is we jointly, all the three centers are doing our joint needs assessments and priority setting as one rice program, one global rice program. Next. Okay, so this is our last slide. So basically, some of the lessons learned as we go through this whole process, beginning in 2019, is that I think most importantly is for us to have a fundamental understanding of where we want to go to create a robust organization. So we look at this organizational structure, vision and mission must be clear, and the clarity needs to be to also be clear to the people that are doing this work, and clearly through 1CG there is alignment and development of teamwork. We define a definition of core services, and raw resources and capabilities must be there. Creation of clear KPIs and roles, who's doing what, and also all this can lead to transparency and accountability. And I think for accountability is super important for us to be able to achieve the vision that we have. Another lessons learned is we talk a lot. Steffen talked a lot about change management. We also see, obviously, as we are bringing this forward, there's clearly need to have change management. It's happening, and one of the key pillars in change management is clear communication. People know where we are going, what is needed for us to get there. We need engagement from the staff, from everyone that's part of this system, and also their buy-in, because I think that's super important, so that we move with a single mind. And in order to plan, planning is not enough. The execution part is also very important. You need to have a system of road mapping, so at least you know where you are in terms of the whole planning end-to-end. We are doing unified operational demand and supply planning system as well, so that everything this is our approach towards like total consolidation of all the breeding operations. And then to see where we are in the roadmap, we need to put in the milestones and develop some form of progress monitoring, so we know we are moving correctly towards where we want to go. And I think Michael says that failing is not frowned upon, but you need to quickly correct your course if you know certain ways are not working. So that's what we are doing as well. And I think this is the last slide. Finally, we want to thank EiB for giving us this opportunity to share our experience. And we also want to thank AfricaRice and CGIAR for being with us in the development of the OneRice breeding strategy, and the funders, of course, because I guess without them, there'll be issues to get all these things on the road. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much, Sankalp and Sharifa. Again, a lot of major changes happening on the rice landscape across the CG and national systems. So I think we would now like to open it up for a bit of a panel discussion. So if you have a question that you would like to ask any of the presenters that have presented today, please do raise your hand and you can ask it live. If you prefer to type it in the chat, you can do so too. So I'd like to invite Michael, Stefan, Felista, Joyce, Sankalp, and Sharifa. If you could just turn on your videos, I think that'll ensure that you're on the top of the stream.
Is that right? Okay, yes. I don't know how to turn off this thing. Okay, yes.
Okay, so we can see you, Sharifa. Thanks. And you're trying to stop sharing? Is that what you were trying to? Yeah, it should be just at the bottom there somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So let's see if there are any hands up. If not, I will kick it off with a question. So I see Joyce here. Thanks for being there, Joyce, and Felista too. Okay, so I don't see any hands popping up, so I'll kick it off, perhaps with a question for Stefan. So Stefan, you've been very closely involved with EBS, you're managing the project, and you're also very closely involved with the IITA Cassava project. What has been your experience with those two projects, Stefan, in terms of change management? What have been some of the challenges and how have they been addressed? You're muted, Stefan.
Yeah, sorry, that's difficult talking against the mute button. Well, thanks for the question, Bish. Well, one of the first things I usually start working with any of the teams is vision. This is really to be very clear. Another thing that I tried to set up, the teams from Cassava and EBS, they know that ensuring a clear leadership mandate. So forming basically a steering body that directly works with the team that has to basically put the change in place. That is really important. And those leaders need to be mandated as well. And they need to basically remove roadblocks for the teams, etc. So that is an important thing. Well, and then it comes down to the technicalities of the three cogwheels that I basically said. So in both EBS and also in our first Cassava project, we started out developing a blueprint. So based on the vision that you have, you get more specific on where do we come from, where do we go to. In the first Cassava project, we had the improvement plan. We made this a bit more specific and highlight a little bit, okay, what is the gap we have to bridge from where we need to be? So this is all about clarity. Well, and then of course setting up an effective project organization. So making clear who is basically involved in the change, and then what roles that everyone have in this team, so that you really establish a fruitful teamwork. I would say those are the most important things to put in place, and because at the end it's people driving the change. There's always a crowd that is mandated, and you need to make sure they can be successful. That is basically the thing you have to do.
Great. Thanks very much, Stefan. Some good insights there. So a lot of planning up front, yep. Very strong focus on leadership, and yeah. If I see a question in the chat, okay, I think it's something related to something slightly different. So I will perhaps ask the next question, unless any hands come up, and perhaps this one to Michael Quinn, who's been Director of Excellence in Breeding for about 4 years now. So Michael, you've been working with many CG centers and national programs. What has been the most encouraging or profound change that you've seen in the last 4 years in the system?
Yeah, good question, Bish. And while I'm answering, please, others, don't be shy. There's 100 or so of you there. There must be some questions, so please don't be shy. Jump in. So put your hand up. Great question, Bish. For me, it's a little bit difficult to answer because there are so many things happening. I mean, just looking at the things happening at IRRI and KALRO, and even at those just two institutions, there are so many things happening that it's hard to point to just one thing. So for me, I think that it's really about the change in mindsets that I'm observing. And first of all, this is really substantial, but secondly, it's so important. And so I'm really so pleased to see it, because we talk about culture, and if we don't get this, if we don't get change in mindsets, then we're failed from the outset. And to try and get a little bit more specific, I mean, first of all, I think it's well known now that there are opportunities in front of us, and that the job at hand is to implement change. I think that that's really taken hold amongst the mindsets of breeding teams and scientists in the system. But also there's clearly greater understanding of the key principles and concepts. And if we don't have that, then we're not going to get them implemented. And that's clearly happening. I mean, compared to when I started, I mean, the conversations that are being had around breeding cycle time, target product profiles, having breeding pipelines aligned with market segments, the fact that we've actually got an inventory now where we can show people this is what the CG does. Genetic gain, measuring genetic gains and doing so in a standardized way. I mean, there are so many of these things that are where people are talking about them in a more standardized way, but the fact that they're even just talking about them, I mean, 4 years ago, I mean, pipelines aligned with market segments, so many breeding pipelines just thought of, well, this breeding program is combining these traits. Many of them didn't really think about, well, what are the varieties in the marketplace you're trying to replace and where are they being grown and for what farmers and for what impact you're trying to have. These are things that are now at the forefront of breeders' minds, and it's so great to see. We are presenting, I mean, the heads of breeding of each of the institutes come together monthly through a process that Excellence in Breeding is leading. The funders come along as well to look at the progress that's being made against this modernisation agenda. And the whole atmosphere of that meeting has changed dramatically in the 18 months that we've been running it. From the beginning, it was very much about this is my program and trying to present it in the best possible light. But now we're really coming together about, okay, this is my program, warts and all. How can we come together to make it better? And most recently, we've been looking at what the genetic gain, the realised genetic gains are, and that the conversation's been fantastic around that in terms of, okay, this is the genetic gains, but here's the problems with how we encountered, and let's come together as to how to overcome them. So that's a long answer. It's a little bit complicated and difficult to answer, but I'm really excited, and it's mostly because of the mindsets.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so it does sound like the conversation's changed quite a lot in the last 4 years, and I think there's a realization that change is natural and it's actually quite healthy in the system. Vish, you have your hand up, so if you would like to ask your question live, please go ahead.
Thanks, Vish, and my appreciation goes for all the presenters this morning. My question is to Michael again. I'm new to CG space. Okay, I come from a different background, and one of the things that I encountered in this past 1 year, talking to so many stakeholders within the institution, one of the concerns raised is they have to listen to multiple kind of, I would say, not institutions, but multiple little organizations. I mean, here I say it's EiB, BPAT, and other components, and somehow they want to get away from that one. Like they want one kind of team approaching them always, not multiple teams, because, and most of the time they are spending too many hours Zooming or being in meetings. This is one of the concerns that was raised during one of the platforms where I was doing some of the things. That is one. The second thing is the donors are also asking a bulkier reports every year, and they spend too much time writing those reports. And I don't want a real answer from you or exist. How about we are going to deal with these things? Like by when we will say that, okay, within one CG, there will not be multiple stakeholders approaching the breeding team or any other operational team. That is one big question. The second thing is, will one CG convince donors that why do we need such bulkier reports? I mean, can't we make it so simpler so that it is understood between the donors or the higher management level? If they understand what is happening in the program, why everybody at the bottom of the hierarchy should write bulkier reports? I mean, these are the two important concerns that I came across in my past 1 year in CG space. Thanks.
Thanks, Vish. That's some great comments, and you're absolutely right. This is a massive problem. And to try to answer, basically, if we can't solve this with one CG, then I think that we've failed to achieve what we've set out to achieve. I'm personally very optimistic that that the move to one CG will do much better in this space, and I see it too. I mean, Excellence in breeding is setting direction. Obviously, the centres themselves are setting direction. Funders are often getting very involved and having very specific requests. The BPAT come and I've a lot of appreciation for the BPAT. I think that it's a great tool and a great service, but I do see the point that they're making recommendations as well. And going forward, we have to use the opportunity to, when we come together as a single organisation to gain alignment across all those stakeholders. So going forward, the funders will hopefully leave it to the managers of the system to manage it, but then it'll be up to the managers to ensure that they are that they're aligning with the funders' wishes. And the funders are a heterogeneous group, so that's no easy task, but that's what needs to happen. And that way we can achieve that separation from management and the funders. Excellence in breeding. I mean, excellence in breeding is really put in place because we are currently the only organisation that does cut across centres. And so we're really put in place because this integrated management structure wasn't in place. But going forward, much of what we're trying to achieve the functionality of excellence in breeding will exist within this new structure. And BPAT, they'll likely continue to make recommendations, but with a single organisational, single breeding organisation within CG, it'll be easier to align the types of recommendations, hopefully, that BPAT will be making with the vision and direction that CG breeding is taking. So if we can find that alignment, then that's the goal. That's what we need to do. On the reporting, I also think that, I mean, it's really hard for funders at the moment to see what's really happening and to drive accountability. And so I think they continuously ask for more and more reports, and they're each asking in their own formats. I think going forward, if we can achieve greater funding going through the pooled funding route, and then we're just reporting to on effectively the pooled funding, then there will be less bilateral and Windows 3 projects to report on, and hopefully we can reduce the reporting load as well. So basically, the short answer is this needs to be the goal of the management team as we're moving towards one CGIAR. And as the leader of the Accelerated Breeding Initiative, certainly this is my ambition to try and address these issues through the way we're setting up that initiative.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Thanks a lot, Michael, and thanks, Vish, for the question. Very pertinent question. There is a question for Stefan in the chat from Godfrey. So, Stefan, if you're comfortable to take that, and then perhaps we will wrap up the panel discussion session with a quick question for colleagues from IRRI and KALRO and what have been the biggest barriers they've encountered in their change agendas. So, over to you first, Stefan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Godfrey. This is a good question. Can you enforce change by mainstreaming performance management? Remember the slide that I showed with the 6 levers of change? Performance management is one of the 6. You need to get all 6 right, but of course, performance management is very strong. And to the question we just had from Vish, what gets measured gets changed. You need to be strategic about what you measure. And then also how you report it. And there's nothing worse than having to deliver 1,000 reports or having 1,000 different systems, how you basically measure this. But you need to be very careful about how you design it doesn't matter what tool you use, the measures, they need to be the right one to drive the right behaviors. And that needs a little bit of research. So answer is, yes, one of managing performance is one of 6 things that you need to get right.
Thanks very much, Stefan. Hans, I see you have your hand up. Just to make sure we have take full advantage of the panel. Is it a question directed to colleagues from IRRI or KALRO?
No, this is for Michael, and I did post it on the chat. I don't know if Michael got to see this or not. But I can repeat it.
You can ask it live. Yeah.
Well, I think the question is very simple.
Yeah, so you're asking how do we plan to secure attention and support amongst the complex transition, attention for the smaller crops, or attention of the EMT, or attention among?
No, I'm talking about for the ABI, the breeding IDT, which is to me is still the core of our business, in the 1CG, and also perhaps the largest IDT. But the way the transition is being handled and is going on, it is just treated as one of the 35 or one of the 33 initiatives. So how would you ensure that we are getting enough attention and support going forward under the 1CG umbrella, that this, our core business, doesn't get neglected or not get enough supported?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that ultimately this is unfortunately going to come down to the funders, because at the moment, if you look at the funding that's going to go into accelerated breeding, we're getting a portion of the full pooled funding, but breeding is predominantly funded by Windows 3 and bilateral at the moment. And so the question is that going to continue, or is it going to switch over to pooled? And if it does switch, if that switch is made, then it can't just be treated like just any other initiative, just one of the 32 odd initiatives, and it has to be treated differently. And I don't think the funders will make that switch unless it is. And so currently the initiative is written as a framework for all breeding in the CG. So we do describe how the pooled funding would be used, but it is actually it sets out a vision and a framework for all breeding, which would include Windows 3 and bilateral projects as well, to fall within that framework and to head towards those same goals. Basically, I don't think that switch will happen unless it is viewed somewhat differently.
Yeah, I think we need to work towards that, so that people look at that differently. It is not just one of the 33s. Yeah,
I agree, and I think as a breeding community, we need to all be pushing towards that, because otherwise, the senior leaders within the system, if they just treat, like you say, like it is being treated, just like another initiative. I mean, breeding is core business for the CG, and it's not just one of the 33 different things that we do. It's just not.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michael, and thanks, Hans, for that live question. So I think we can wrap up the session with a quick question for KALRO, and then one for IRRI too. So to Joyce and Felista, you've embarked on a number of very impressive projects at KALRO. For the benefit of other colleagues on the line, I mean, what would you say was the single most important thing that helped you drive some of those changes within KALRO? If you had to pick one thing that really was critical to driving change.
I may allow Dr. Felista to start. Dr. Felista.
Okay, thank you, Bish, for that question. I would say also really the willingness of the leadership really helped, because I think in the very initial stages, the discussions was with the leadership. And so I know that to get change, and I think it has also been said, it is important that the leadership embrace change. But also Joyce can add, because even at also more implementation level, she has been involved. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that for me, the biggest impact as I look at EIB engagement with KALRO has been changing the mindset of scientists from running their breeding programs from manual independent systems. And we are sitting here, breeders are there, to a more consolidated open data approach. Issues of trust have been minimized, and because of the ability also to use handheld data collectors, it's been possible for us and the breeders to be able to go into the field, collect data, upload it on the server, analyze it, generate reports and make decisions and even share. And I would add publish. I think for NAS, CG, you've worked with us, I found that has been our weakest point, because of course we collected data. And of course you trained us to collect data. But entering that data into the computer, getting that single biostatistician to analyze it, really meant that a lot of data was lost. And also that means selection of quality lines was also became a drawback. So I would say this has been really the biggest impact for us, which you can see there is a change. There's a change in the outputs that are coming out of KALRO. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joyce and Felicita. And maybe very quickly, the same question to you, Sharif and Sankalp, just to get some feedback from IRRI as well.
Yeah, okay. For me, again, similarly as well, I think most importantly, the change in mindset. I think one thing what we have done is in establishing centralized research operation is having a partnership mindset and partnership relationship with rice breeding team versus service provider type of interaction. However, although having that partnership mindset is very important, but we must also operate with the service provision mindset as well, because the need to have quality output and also efficiency is there. So it's like delivering a particular service in a private sector. So those things need to be there, but the relationship works as a partner. So I think that's the best thing and the most difficult thing to achieve as well. Thanks. Sankalp.
Thank you, Sharif. I think both these factors are important. The willingness definitely is where, it would all start. I think just something personal, I personally saw might, just probably give a different perspective. Nothing special, but I think it also comes to the ability for, of people to reach out at the right times and connect, and the willingness to accept, accept the process. I think it's the willingness. If people don't reach out oftentimes, because we have seen some of the barriers to implementation. We have seen silos. If you just multiply them by 15, you would see similar problems across, you just see CG-wide challenges. I think it's also important to see why the situation was how it was, and then start to address it from that point, to avoid the mistakes, which were, there are good things, naturally. We speak about the gains, we speak about the varieties, we speak about various achievements, but looking at why things were the way they were would help as well. And I think if we can offer the safe space for everyone to be accounted, everyone to be recognized, everyone to feel safe and feel belong to this initiative, or any other initiative for that matter, I think that helps. And then the rest of the other things happen voluntarily. People start to feel ownership. People start to feel like reaching out. They start to feel like they're accountable, and they have no agenda, but one common unidirectional pull follows as a result. But just this, I think I saw that was a big driver as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sharifa and Sankalp, for that insight from IRRI as well. So I think we will now need to wrap up the panel discussion. Hans, I see your hand up, but I think we're rapidly running out of space.
I just want to add one thing to what Sharifa and Sankalp said, that I think underlying all this is creating a shared vision for the different teams and the groups involved into that. That really drives the thing. And then, of course, along with the trust, and all those things will fall in place. Yeah, thank you. Just want to add that.